All week long, we've heard experts, talk show hosts, and others tell singer Rihanna that it's a bad move to get back with her boyfriend, Chris Brown, who allegedly beat her on the night before the Grammys. One thing I've noticed, though, is that we haven't spent a lot of time at all focusing on the male aspect of domestic violence. So that's why tonight we changed that, and we purposely assembled an all-male panel to confront the role men play in domestic violence. Now, before we get to that, I want you to listen to Chris Brown on the Tyra Banks show in 2007, long before the incident with Rihanna, where he talked about violence in his own home growing up.
I know some people in their families go through it, domestic violence and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to mention the person's name, but like somebody that hurt my mom, you know what I'm saying? And me having to deal with that from the age of like 7 all the way to like 13, me seeing that and being, you know what I'm saying, like visually abused by it. So.
And how did it affect you?
It affected me, you know what I'm saying? Basically, especially towards women, I treat them differently because I know I don't want to go through the same thing or put a woman through the same thing that person put my mom through.
Joining me now, community organizer, anti-violence activist, and author Kevin Powell. His latest book, The Black Male Handbook, is now out in paperback. Ted Bunch is a co-founder of A Call to Men, the National Association of Men and Women committed to ending violence against women. And Dr. Nando Pelusi, a behavioral psychologist and author of the Neanderthink column for Psychology Today. And Kevin, I want to start with you. You have your own personal story.
Absolutely.
With domestic violence. Talk about that a bit in terms of what you actually experienced.
Well, it happened between 1987 and 1991, so I want to make it clear that it hasn't happened since and it'll never happen again. But I was one of those young men who was socialized in an environment around violence, thinking that violence was the solution for all conflict. As a result, when I became a very young man, you know, I engaged in that kind of behavior towards females.
And what's that kind of behavior?
Violence.
Physical abuse.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the last time it happened was pushing a girlfriend into a bathroom door in 1991. Luckily, I was around a community of very progressive people, activists, who said, one, you've got to get help, which is why the counseling came in, and that's very critical. A lot of folks will say, you know, men will do it again and again and again. If they don't get help, if they don't get counseling, if they don't own that issue of internalized sexism and think it's okay to hit women, they won't change. And so that was very critical for me. Other part of it was beginning to listen to the concerns and voices of women and girls and becoming, at a certain point, an ally to women and girls, which is the work that I do now.
Dr. Pelusi, what about that in terms of him saying that I had to recognize that what I was doing was wrong, but having to get that counseling?
Right, exactly. Kevin shows that he recognized it was a problem. He had the resources and the willingness to work on it. Men can work on it, but don't forget that, you know, some of it is socialization, but some of it is the male, masculine mind trying to commandeer women. It's been something that men have done throughout history. We try to learn how to control ourselves, and in this case, you know, you found a way to do it. But a lot of it is what men tell themselves. For example, if men say, I have to control her, I need her to respect me, what happens is his ego gets in the way. He puts himself down, and the woman is suddenly given the power to put him down. And what happens is he thinks the only thing left for me to do is to commandeer this, and it escalates more and more.
In a moment, I'm going to go to a phone caller from Chicago. I want to go to Ted. Ted, what about that? You focus on the sexism that men must confront. What about, talk a bit about that.
Yes, well, thank you. Well, domestic violence is the manifestation of sexism. It's a gender-based crime, right? Gender-based violence. So when we look at men's violence against women, it's interesting that when a man's angry or stressed out or upset, he knows who he can hit and who he can't hit. In other words, the violence is selective and exclusive. So when he's upset at work, or when he's upset with the police, or when he's upset in any other situation, he has conflict resolution skills. But see, he doesn't need to use those because our socialization, or how we're taught to be men, our definition of manhood, says that women have less value than men.
But he also knows he's going to pay a price to hit a cop.
Well, exactly. And there is no price because we don't value women. Because there's no value in women. We're taught that women are property. We're taught that women are objects. And so we don't need to look at it so much as an individual ill, but a social ill needing a social response. And it's men as a collective that are the problem. This man is just operating out of how he's been taught. In other words, we taught Chris Brown very well how to disrespect women.
I want to go to Tracy from Chicago who's on the phone lines. Tracy, what's your comment?
Hi, Roland. How you doing?
Great.
I just wanted to say that I'm really glad that you're talking about this because over the last few weeks, I mean, this whole Chris and Rihanna thing has really blown up, and I really haven't heard men to step up and speak up and say, you know, this shouldn't happen, this is wrong. I mean, a lot of the celebrity guys are retracting their words. I don't know, you know, if they're scared of the repercussions, but I want to hear men stand up and say this is wrong. And as far as Chris and Rihanna, I personally think that they both have issues that they need to work out, and being together right now doesn't really seem like the answer. So I would ask you, why do you think that, a lot of men aren't stepping up and saying, this is wrong? Can you tell me that?
Tracy, we certainly appreciate that. Kevin, you want to respond to her comment?
A couple of things. The doctor made a great point, which is it's not just, the particular environment you come from. We live in a society that there's this thing called policing of male behavior. And so from the time we were boys, and I can speak from my own experiences, growing up playing sports, the names that were called if a boy, as you said, off camera, throws a football, that kind of thing. And so, unfortunately, a lot of men are afraid to step out of those boundaries because they're afraid of being perceived as not a man, And so when you talk about the situation with Chris Brown, it's not just about Chris Brown. What I say to men all the time, even if you're not the kind of man who would ever strike a woman, ever do anything disrespectful to a woman, but you have people around you who do those kind of things, you say nothing about it, you become just as guilty. You've got to have the courage to step out, even if it's by yourself.
And it's not just physical. You also deal with the whole verbal aspect as well. Hold tight 1 second. Panel, you're going to stay with us. We're coming right back, folks. One way to break the cycle of abuse, the Domestic Violence Toolkit from the National Advisory Council on Violence Against Women. Check it out at toolkit.ncjrs.org. We're back with community activist Kevin Powell, Ted Bunch from A Call to Men, and psychologist Nando Pelusi taking your questions on violence against women and breaking the cycle of abuse. The number to call, of course, is 1-877-662-8550. Now, Ted, you believe that men need to check each other when they see that kind of behavior, the verbal abuse, because we know what it leads to.
Right, yes, thank you. Men as a collective are the problem. That our silence, as Kevin spoke about, that the overwhelming majority of violence against women is men's violence against women, but the majority of the men are not violent, but we're silent about the violence that those men who are violent perpetrate. And that silence is also our way of giving permission for them to be abusive. So we have to start speaking out, whether it's not just about a man hitting a woman, it's about the sexist joke at the water cooler, it's about the looking at the woman's body as she goes by. It's all of those things that desensitize us to even the humanity of women, because it's really a men's issue. If anyone needs to take responsibility for this, it's men.
Dr. Pelusi, how do we then, though, focus on this issue of treatment? Frankly, can a man be treated when it comes to domestic violence?
The answer is definitely yes, he can work on himself, but there are a couple of things to look at, including the picture of the relationship. Women sometimes get deathly afraid. They can't imagine leaving somebody. They also sometimes tell themselves, he really loves me. I need him, and he really loves me. This is just a bad behavior. I'm going to try to work it out. I think that's sort of a trap, that women need to be careful that they're saying, well, yeah, he does beat me up periodically, and it's very shameful to tell people, and that's why they may not, and the community is very important.
Kevin, I've been watching Oprah and Tyra Banks and so many others say, why is Rihanna going back? But I have not been hearing men say, Chris, why are you back in a relationship? You need to be using this time working on you.
A couple things Chris needs to do. One is own the issue. That's very important. Take ownership for it. And number two, counseling is tremendously important. The mistake that he's making, that both are making, is thinking that they can do this together, work this thing out. Clearly, there's self-esteem issues on both sides. She's going through battered women's syndrome. It's very obvious this is happening on a public stage. And on his side, if I can just, let people know that it's okay, she's back with me, I'll be all right. No, that's not going to change anything. You've got to get out of a relationship and get help. It's very critical.
Because, Doc, one of the things, and Ted also, one of the things I saw in terms of looking at when the charges were filed, she reads this text message on his phone, she reacts, begins to hit him, and he responds. The point there is, and it's not justification, but the point there is, both parties cannot be in a violent relationship. You can't have men and women hitting each other.
There's a line you don't cross. I mean, look, even good relationships have arguments. Good relationships, men, yell and stuff like that. But they find a way to work it out. But when violence happens, then that's a line that's crossed, and that's very serious.
Well, look, we certainly appreciate this, and I hope more folks have this conversation, because it cannot be only women talking about domestic violence. If we don't address men, then we're going to continue to have the same problem. Kevin, Ted, and Nando, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. And, folks, thank you to the viewers who called in tonight. If we didn't take your phone call, sorry about that. We are listening to the voicemails. You're leaving us.